Ladies and gentlemen, 480Hz OLED monitors have arrived, and I have one right in front of me. This is LG's 32GS95UE, and it's easily one of the best gaming monitors ever created. It's 32 inches in size, it has ridiculously low levels of motion blur, and it packs in a crystal clear 4K resolution. So why is it then that I'm not 100% happy with this? I mean, it's got the dream spec sheet. It should literally be perfect, but alas, sadly, I don't think it is. Join me to learn absolutely everything you need to know about what is an incredible but perhaps slightly flawed monitor after a short word from this video's sponsor. The Acer Predator Helios 16 and 18 have arrived, and these gaming laptops take Ultimate to a whole new level. With the latest 14th gen Intel Core processors, Nvidia's 40 series of laptop GPUs, and the option for jaw-dropping 1000 nit HDR screens, these laptops can quite literally do it all. Not only that, but 1 month of PC Game Pass is also included with any computer in the Acer Nitro or Predator gaming range, with titles like Diablo 4, Manor and Forza Motorsport ready to play on day one. Learn more today with the link down below. Let's kick things off with the good. What makes this monitor such a big deal? Well, put simply, it's the fact that this is the fastest OLED gaming monitor on the planet right now, and when it comes to raw specifications, I don't really think you can beat this thing. In a nutshell, a great gaming display needs to look good, sound good, and quite literally feel good, and I'm pleased to report that this monitor delivers all three with ease. The monitor itself is perhaps a little bit dull in its design, with a new LG stand for 2024 that looks a little bit more Dunder Mifflin than Pimp My Ride, but to be fair, it's not really a problem, as it's actually very sturdy, adjustable, and somewhat thin on the waistline, but competitors do look a little bit more gamery, if this makes any difference to you. Obviously though, the thing that matters more than anything else absolutely has to be the panel type itself, and this being an LG display, it quite literally uses an LG display. This is an LG WOLED, and it's 4K and 32 inches, which for me is like the perfect bundle. Make no mistake, this is a huge win, and exactly what we've been waiting for, as the screen is large enough to see all of that beautiful 4K detail without having so much heft that it loses its practicality. It's just as happy being a Netflix machine as it is handling spreadsheets or the hours-long Fortnite sessions that have thrown its way. And on that note, let's chat about gaming, because obviously for a gaming display that is the most important thing. And this actually has a little bit of a party trick, because in the default out-of-the-box state you get this, which is a 4K 240Hz monitor. But at the press of a button, it becomes a 1080p but 480Hz monitor. And I have a lot to say about both. My testing was quite simple this time, with hours of ranked Fortnite, a little bit of CS2, and a lot less shouting at the screen with some more relaxing sessions of Horizon Forbidden West. And actually, it's Fortnite that's a prime example of where this monitor shines, as it's a game that you can drive at a high refresh rate with the right hardware, and it's one that does have an advantage to have extra sharpness to distant objects. It really is an absolute joy to play on this, as the monitor has such a low level of motion blur and input lag that you have the confidence to gear up and engage with a moment's notice, regardless of whether that's a close-up encounter or picking off enemies at a distance. Never has a 4K monitor been more suited to multiplayer gaming. Except for the others that we'll talk about in a second. Turning to our single-player title, Horizon is arguably the best-looking HDR game on PC, and indeed it does look absolutely stunning on this display. Because it's OLED, you get inky blacks, vibrant colour, and fantastic contrast, which, in a game as visually striking as Horizon, forms one heck of a mesmerising package. Do be aware though that even with an RTX 4090, I was topping out at around about 120 FPS at DLSS balanced. So do be aware that the chances of you running every game at 4K 240Hz is all but impossible. But all of that testing was done in the 4K 240Hz mode, so what happens when we turn on the 480 Full HD? Does this change for the better or for the worse? Well, to be honest, it's kinda a bit mid. It's okay. That's it, end of review. Now, real talk. I know this will be a headline feature and a lot of you may well be very interested in this indeed, but the honest truth is that it's just not really as useful as I think most people perhaps expect it to be. I tested this in both Fortnite and CS2, and I can absolutely see the appeal, as I did feel slightly more connected to the game, and in CS especially, I'd argue that esports pros would be able to get a higher KD as a result of this mode. But essentially, it's just a game of diminishing returns really, as the 240Hz OLED is already in insanely sharp in motion, and the number of games that it can actually run at 480Hz at 1080p is more limited than you might think. At the end of the day, the extra fluidity is what I've described as probably noticeable, assuming you can get a constant 480 FPS, whereas the hit to the image quality, 1080p on a 32-inch screen when you're very close to it, well, this is incredibly noticeable. So I'd actually steer people more towards using things like DLSS and maybe set that to performance mode in the 4K mode rather than going for this. But obviously it's nice to have. I mean, all of the competition that doesn't have this, they wish they would have it. But if you're specifically looking at this because of this feature, it's not really something I would actively say is like a must-have. I mean, if you're an esports professional, you'd be looking at something that's even faster and probably a fair bit smaller. So good to have, but not a game changer. To be fair to LG, they definitely did realise that 1080p on a 32-inch screen would look a bit naff, and as such they do actually allow you to set a smaller window size at 1080p, but sadly the scaling on this actually makes the image look even less sharp due to the fact that it's decimal scaling, not integer. So again, nice to have, but I don't think you'll be using this. So then, that is everything that is great about the LG. And I mean, it really is a fantastic display, and I'd argue that 99% of you would kill for this monitor, because it really is awesome at pretty much anything that you throw at it. But unfortunately, the elephant in the room, I could probably just about fit an elephant in here, maybe a little bit short. The elephant in the room is not a mammal. The elephant is the fact that I've been testing this at the same time as the QD OLED, which is the Asus PG32UCDM, and that monitor, I'm afraid, is just better than this. And you'd be absolutely forgiven for not realizing that there are any differences between them, as spec-wise they're incredibly similar, both 240Hz, 4K, flat panel, 32 inches in size, very similar price, but there is actually one huge difference between them. And that is actually that the LG has speakers inside it. No, I mean it does. That is that the LG actually has a matte effect to the panel coating, whereas the Asus goes for a much glossier version. And that might not sound particularly interesting. I mean, honestly, I wouldn't have thought about this a few years ago, but monitors have sort of got so close now in terms of what they can output that seeing the two side by side was ridiculously surprising, because on camera, I'd actually argue that the LG probably looks slightly better when you watch it back. I mean, obviously you're watching it on your own screen, right? So you can't see what I'm seeing. But I assure you, when you have the two side by side, it's crazy how much more the Asus pops. And I think this is pretty much primarily down to the coating, really. It just looks a fair bit more contrasty, more vibrant, and the way I'd describe it is a lot more window-like. I'm going a bit off script now, if you can't tell. Like, I got used to this, okay? I was used to the Asus, I reviewed that, I moved on, I realized this didn't look as good, but I got used to it as hours went by. Great. And then I bloody turned that monitor back on again. I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot how much better this looks. It's insane. There really is no doubt about it. The Asus just looks more real, despite the fact that the image can look a little bit oversaturated at times. From a gaming point of view, there's nothing that would concern me about the LG, with 100% of the sRGB and 93% of the DCI P3 color space covered, but it is below the output of the QD OLED. And there's actually quite a strong green tinge to the screen that was removed with calibration. And to be fair, this could be worse on my particular unit, this review sample, but this is something I wanted to show you, because whilst the Asus was potentially a little bit too red, I think the green twinge, I'm making up words again, the green tinge on this was definitely quite strong. So this is with it calibrated, and if I turn that off, you can see quite a big shift towards the green. HDR content is a similar story, as the capabilities of the two displays aren't mega different, so don't expect huge differences and changes, but you appear to get highlight clipping at 600 nits on the LG, despite the fact that the display can deliver peak brightness values of just over 1000 nits. This meant that while I certainly wasn't lying to you about how good Horizon looked on this, I think there could potentially be an even better image one day, with brighter brights possibly on the horizon with a future firmware update. And I would also like to say that I have updated mine to the latest firmware, which was easy enough but took quite a long time, and it hasn't seemed to make any differences whatsoever, whereas Asus have already been working on their firmware and they've been improving the tone mapping on there. So it's good, it's very good, But if you're coming from like a top-end TV or you've already got like a mini LED monitor or something like that, then you will notice the HDR isn't as dramatic as it potentially could be. And I'll also add that while the differences between the two aren't crazy when it comes to HDR, I do think that the tone mapping is better on the ROG, as even if it doesn't get dramatically brighter than this, my eyes definitely get more contrast from the panel, which is also likely down in part to that glossy coating. When it comes to productivity, both monitors actually excel with their sub-pixel layout, no issues. I think a lot of this is partly down to the improvements in the OLED technology, but then also a lot of it's down to that 4K resolution. Even if you pixel peep, I can't see any like purple fringe or anything, that's great. But as we've kind of already touched on, because of the matte panel, the LG is either going to be better for productivity or worse depending on your individual circumstance. As you can probably guess, the LG is indeed better in brightly lit rooms, as its matte panel means you can work with open blinds on overcast days without any real issue, but at the cost of moire. The good news here though is that this is absolutely not the worst coating I've seen. In fact, it's not too bad. I can happily use it, and when the windows are open, enjoy it. But white and grey panels and bars do have that awkward, staticky appearance that does hamper an otherwise awesome monitor for both photo editing and grading. As we touched on earlier, as a bit of a joke, this does also have speakers inside it, but this is great if you do want to use this in like a bedroom setup. But for some reason, when you have it at max volume, sometimes absolutely fine. Other times, when it's over like 60–65%, it kind of rattles a little bit. It does go away, but that's a little bit odd. And then the other thing is that this does also have a cooling fan inside it. I know, active cooling, it's a disaster. But actually, this is probably the quietest cooling fan I've ever come across. Maybe it's not spinning, I've not heard it come up. And this is something that I said didn't bother me in my previous Alienware video I did, QD-OLED, a couple of years ago, the ultra-wide one. And over time, that has started to ramp up a little bit more. Maybe it's got more dust in it, but either way, that is way, way louder than this. So I hope that won't happen here, but my impression so far, if you told me there wasn't a fan in this, I'd believe you. And so then, with all of those factors on the table, suddenly we find ourselves with a choice. Two seemingly similar monitors, but with surprisingly big differences. The question is though, which one should you go for? WOLED versus QD-OLED. And I want to make that big difference and distinction really, because the Asus is great. We've already tested that, but there are other versions of that QD-OLED, and actually the one that I think is standing out to a lot of people right now is the Alienware, because granted that's curved, which personally I don't think I'll prefer, but I'll reserve judgment till I've tested it. You can buy that at the moment for £1,000. So the LG is coming here with this WOLED panel that goes up to 480 Hz, which is good. I'm glad that it can do that. And obviously with that matte finish. So it really is that simple. If you're watching this video, should you buy this over the competition, assuming they're all the current price that they are now, you've got to pay more for a matte finish that personally I think isn't as good as the glossy. So if you're in a brightly lit room, you do play a lot of Counter-Strike, and you do also play a lot of other things where you can take advantage of the 4K resolution, then obviously it makes sense, right? If that's what you want, that monitor, I realise that's the Asus, it's on my desk, that doesn't make sense to you, but pretty much for everyone else that just wants to buy like a proper do-it-all gaming monitor, you actively want 4K resolution, you've got loads of horsepower at your disposal, then if you're choosing between this and the Asus, I'd take the Asus every time. This is a monitor that is awesome, it looks great, I'm really happy with it, but the Asus is the monitor that makes me want to go out and buy a new monitor. That's the biggest praise I can give to that. I think both of them will improve over time with firmware updates, but ultimately it's going to come down to price for a lot of people, and LG typically lower their prices over time more, or at least you can find them for less than the Asus, and that's when things get a little bit more interesting. But all the time the Alienware is around about £300 in the UK cheaper than the LG. It's a monitor that becomes a little bit more difficult to recommend. So let me know your thoughts on this down in the comment section below. Do you agree with me that you'd rather go for glossy than matte, or do you think I'm like bizarre, I'm mad, matte every time, brightly lit rooms for the win? Let us know down in the comment section below. We'd love to hear from you. Do smash the like button, by the way, and get yourself subscribed so you don't miss future monitor videos and all of our PC builds. And of course, as always, if you do want to check out current pricing on this monitor and all of the competition, I'll leave links to as many as possible, links down below with our affiliate links. And while you're down there, why not revel in the victorious new Helios range from Acer Predator? Both the Helios 16 and 18 come with up to a 24-core Intel i9-4900HX CPU and the latest NVIDIA 40 series graphics. Cooling is handled by the 5th generation of Acer Aeroblade 3D fans and liquid metal thermal grease, and thanks to the mini LED HDR screens, your games are going to look absolutely stunning. All Acer Predator and Nitro gaming machines also come with 1 month of free PC Game Pass, so you won't need to pay extra for your first weeks of sheer gaming bliss. Grab yours today with the link down below. Thank you so much for watching this video. We'll catch you in the next one.